about critical thinking and what exactly do you think they measure in critical thinking? You know, what is it? How do you define beyond text is what they call it, beyond text. How do you measure beyond text? And it was interesting because when we were fighting outcome-based education, there was a certain aspect of NAEP that was testing higher order thinking skills. And I had one of the parents from Iowa who had called me, who had a proctor from Educational Testing Service that came in because the parents demanded to see the test. So I got this frantic phone call, and they said, Anita, we can't figure out which questions are bad, you know, and they were looking desperately. So I said, well, read me the prompt. And it was a story about the dove and the ant, and the dove was such a free spirit flying over the land, and the ant was such an industrious person. And, you know, the story went on like that. Well, the first question was a comprehension question. That's a text question. You can go back into the story and read it. It said, where did the dove like to fly? And it had specific things, and the child could go back into the story and answer it. That's a comprehension question. The next question was, let's see, who would you rather be, the ant or the dove? This is a higher order thinking skill test question. Who would you rather be? So whenever my parent read this off to me, I said, go back to the proctor and ask him how he scores that. Who would you rather be, the ant or the dove? The proctor was totally floored. He became so flustered he couldn't answer the question. He folded up all of his papers and he left, and he probably went directly to call Educational Testing Service. So maybe the test questions aren't as blatant as they are in the EQA, but they've become more scientific. They incorporate the threshold levels within the different test questions within your reading language arts. So they will ask an attitudinal question within that reading section. So be prepared for this, parents. You need to ask to see the test, there's no doubt. Now, going back to dispositions, critical thinking, working collaboratively, metacognition, self-awareness, creativity, time goal management, resilience, adaptability, leadership, ethical behavior, and civic responsibility, social awareness, empathy, self-control. All right, let's take ethical behavior and civic responsibility. I had developed, back when we were fighting the Pennsylvania EQA, 5 magic questions. This is perfect for any parent to use whenever you're fighting the Common Core standards once they get to the dispositions. Here they are. Number 1, how do you measure that standard? For example, if a college and career standard states that all children must have ethical judgment, honesty, or integrity, what exactly is going to be measured? How do you measure a bias in a child? Must children be diagnosed? Will they be graded by observation, or do they have to take a pencil and paper test? How will performance or behavior be assessed? Number 2, how is that objective scored, or what is that standard? What behavior is appropriate and to what degree? For example, how much self-esteem is too much or not enough in order to graduate? Can government score the attitudes and values of citizens in a pluralistic society? Who decided what that standard would be? The state has extended its mandated graduation requirement, or the Common Core standard, OBE, or whatever, down to the individual child. This bypasses all local autonomy. What about your locally elected school directors? Will they become obsolete? Are we talking about a state or a government diploma or a certificate for work? Number 4, how will my child be remediated? What are you going to do to my children to change them from here to there in their attitudes, values, and dispositions in order to graduate? How do you remediate ethical judgment, decision-making, interpersonal skills, environmental attitudes, adapting to change? What techniques will be used? What risks are involved? What justification does the state have to change my child's attitudes? And number 5, what if the parent and your government disagree on how the standard is measured in the classroom? Who has the ultimate authority over the child, the parents or the government? What about privacy? Can parents opt out of a graduation requirement mandated by the government? So let's talk about that privacy, and this will be my last aspect of what I want to tell the country. I believe that the weakest link to this whole system is under FERPA, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. Why? I believe that because this law was changed through executive order by President Obama, that this is the weakest link that we can go after. If I could make a difference fighting the State Department of Education, which forced them to comply to federal law, so can you. FERPA was changed without congressional authority. They're allowing cooperative written agreements through FERPA when they apply for funds for a race to the top. And I'm talking about the PARC, the Partnership for Assessment for Readiness for College and Career Test, the ACT Aspire Test, the Smarter Balanced Assessment Test. These different nonprofits, different organizations, and they also, when you get the contracts that they have, these written agreements that FERPA allows them to have, they are able to access that redisclosed personal PII, personal individually information from the test that you don't know about. So this information must be gotten by them to do their research, to do these individual modules for computer retrieval, for remediation, these individual career plans that must be done according to the compliance of the data system. The data collection is your weakest link. They have to have the information. The race to the top says specifically in their contracts that they have to have test blueprints to measure difficult to measure standards. That's your dispositions, parents. They have to be able to access, to have a continuum to compare one date of testing to the next to see if the child, if the teacher is complying. There has to be total standardization of the system. The testing is your weakness. FERPA is the weakness in the system. So I have the executive order that was done through the Office of Management and Budget and through the GAO office, the General Accounting Office, where they said, well, where is the weakness in the system so that we will be able to access this data? Well, it was FERPA, and they changed it underhandedly. And they underhandedly have told the parents, we're protecting your students' profiles, when in the end, the redisclosure to these nonprofits, these contractors, is happening right now. No. Understand, these organizations, these nonprofits, get this data for free. It's just given to them for research. Cooperative agreements. PARC has Florida as their fiscal agent that has gone to all of the different states with a written agreement saying, you'll conform to this agenda. We'll give you all the data. We can do the research. And you can make all the money in the end. Then you can sell it back to the local school districts to test and do the curriculum and your software for individual children to implement this agenda. So all of these organizations are feeding at the federal trough in order to align and do research and develop all of this curriculum. And they're making tons of money, but on your child. So there is a question of intellectual property. Once this information is collected on individual students, that is psychological data, that they're going to do IEPs, the legal aspect comes into play. Any of the psychiatrists will tell you that that is personal information that cannot be shared with anyone. Even under a court of law, if someone comes in and says, well, what was in, when you were having someone in therapy, they were not allowed to give that information. And now we're going to give it for free to these contractors so that we can control the behaviors of students, of people in the United States? No, no, it cannot be. FERPA is your weakest link. We have, or we're trying to work on several, I want to call them projects, in order to stop FERPA, but we need your help. We need people in all the states. You have Smarter Balanced assessments, you have the PARCC assessments, and you have ACT. And I believe the ACT's name for their test is Aspire. ACT said that they were going beyond academics, starting in kindergarten. Kindergarten is put to the test in order to test the behavioral aspects of children. This is really their weak link, and I think we can do it. But we need to really focus on all of the cooperative agreements, everything in the redisclosure of information. We've got to expose the executive order. We've got to expose the GAO, who was involved in telling the president that he was able to do an executive order to access the data. The collection of data is the weakest link. And we're asking for your support in combining our efforts in order to target the weakest link so that we can fortify what the United States have always been and protect the United States as a republic. Thank you very much.